I find no discrepancy between the wounds as they're shown very vividly in these photographs and what I remember very vividly. It was a very large...
But do the doctor's assertions that they saw no altered wounds clear up the issue? The drawings suggest what many of the photos examined by the doctors in Nova show, a large wound about this size and location. But what about this photo, which shows what appears to be only a small entry wound in the back of Kennedy's head? Dr. McClellan speculates.
The pathologist has taken this loose piece of scalp, which is hanging back this way in most of the pictures, exposing this large wound, and has pulled the scalp forward to take a picture. Naturally, the scalp appears to be in its normal state, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of wound in the area where I had drawn the picture that showed this large hole.
But doesn't this large wound suggest a shot from the front, as Lifton argues? This drawing, made for Congress, suggests how a small rear entry wound could have created the large wound. Finally, if the large wound was really in this part of the head, why did most of the doctors note back in 1963 that they had seen a specific part of the brain called the cerebellum?
I did say cerebellum in my first official report, and the cerebellum ordinarily is in a posterior part. And here I knew very well that the wound was more anterior than that, but there was a portion of the brain that looked like it had a stalk, and it was convoluted to look like what I thought was cerebellum.
I said that I thought perhaps part of the cerebellum was missing, and that shows how even a trained observer can make an error in a moment of urgency.
In fact, the Dallas doctors were caught up in an emergency life-saving effort. They were not doing an autopsy or trying to describe the wounds.
We simply were performing a tracheostomy and felt that it was not an appropriate thing to do at the time to examine the head wound.
How would you do that with the widow there, the President of the United States, who was dead? What's the... no one thought about the morbidity of doing examination at that time. That would have been a little sacrilegious, I think, under the circumstances.
Their visit to the National Archives revealed that the doctor's original observations in Dallas were done with haste and some imprecision. It should be noted that in previous interviews with journalists, some of their comments seemed to support Lifton's claims of altered wounds. But they made those comments before they saw the color photos at the National Archives. With all the contradictions and unresolved doubts, will we ever come to a final, undisputed conclusion? Josiah Thompson.
In a homicide case, you get a convergence of the evidence after a while. There may be discrepancies in detail, but on the whole, things come together. With this case, it's now 25 years. Things haven't gotten any simpler. They haven't come together. If anything, they become more and more problematical, more and more mysterious. That just isn't the way a homicide case develops.
And the night comes again to the circle-studded sky. The stars settle slowly, in loneliness they lie.
It is understandable that shock, grief, and doubt elevated the tragic event of November 22nd, 1963 to a national obsession.
But they all glow brighter from the brilliance of the blaze, with the speed of insanity. Then he died.
Relying mainly on analysis of physical evidence, Nova has explained many, but not all, questions about the assassination. The single bullet theory remains intact, despite its implausible aspects. There's no irrefutable photographic or acoustic evidence of a second gunman. The president's body was so badly handled, it probably could never be a source of verifiable evidence. To bring us closer to the truth, There could be a new rifle test, a new acoustics test, an examination of the brain if it is ever found, an analysis for traces of blood on the single bullet. Much controversy about the assassination has been political, and the ultimate solution to the mystery may lie outside the domain of science. But science must always set the standard of proof for any answer to the question, who shot President Kennedy?
Stay with 11 now as the American Experience looks at Kennedy versus Wallace, a crisis up close.
Funding for NOVA is provided by Prime Computer, supplying integrated computer solutions to the world's manufacturing, commercial, technical, and scientific marketplaces. And the Johnson & Johnson family of companies, supplying healthcare products worldwide. Major funding for NOVA is provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide.